I've mentioned a few times that HTML5 adds a lot of new input options. So on screen at the moment is a list of all of the possible input types, with the HTML5 ones highlighted in green. As you can see, I'm displaying each element in Chrome, Firefox and Internet Explorer. And this is to highlight the fact that at the time of recording, HTML5 is not currently fully implemented in all of the browsers commonly used. If you take a look at the date, for example, this is fully implemented within Chrome, and the drop-down box is visible when you actually click into the element. With Firefox and Internet Explorer, that's not the case. Firefox is slightly ahead of Internet Explorer, however, as you can see with the colour input, while this is completely missing in Internet Explorer. Because of the fact that not all of the functionality is already available across all browsers, this is probably the biggest issue that a web developer will encounter, because at the moment they can't be assured that all of their users will have the same or similar experiences regardless of the browser that they're using. If you've created HTML pages in the past, a lot of the new input types may be familiar to you in that they have previously been implemented by libraries such as jQuery. Because of the widespread use of jQuery, the actual browser vendors decided that the functionality should actually be built into the browsers themselves, and this actually caused quite a lot of controversy when the specification was being designed, because a very good argument could be made that most of this functionality is and should be jQuery, or JavaScript at the very least. The specification designers, however, decided that HTML should be an easy-to-use language, and not necessarily require the users to import different JavaScript libraries, and so they went ahead and actually incorporated these functionalities for us. So what I'm going to do now is to go through the new HTML5 elements and describe exactly what they're used for, as well as highlighting any unique or interesting features about them. So the first element is button. This is obviously very self-explanatory. This is synonymous in terms of functionality and usage to the input type button, which we've had for a long time in HTML. The reason the button element was created rather than using the input type is simply because of the fact that clicking the button isn't an input in itself in the terms of data. With all of the other input types, the user actually contributes an input, whereas with a button it's simply a click to acknowledge or to call some functionality. It's not input in the same sense. Clicking the colour button will actually bring up a colour swatch, from which the user can select the colours, any colour that they want. The date input field actually restricts what the user can input. It could be considered an input mask, but as well, it also provides a calendar to allow the users to easily select what date they want to input. This one, however, is not implemented across many browsers. Similarly, the date-time input element is intended to act as an input mask for dates and times. Implementation of this input type, however, is very slow, because it's more commonly used in the form of the date-time local element, which provides the same functionality as is intended for the date-time element, but provides it localized to the user. This can be useful if your website is used internationally, because your server will just need to save one single version of the time, which can then be converted back and forth to the user's local time. Next up we have the email attribute. Now it may not look like anything's happening when you're typing an email, but what is happening behind the scenes is when a form is submitted which contains an email field, when that submit button is clicked, it will actually perform a regular expression checkup to see whether the email field actually contains a valid email. If an invalid email is provided, an error message will appear and the user won't be able to actually submit the form. So next up is month. This is very similar to what you would expect it to be. It simply just selects the month and the year. And again, this is just an input mask, which means that you don't need to actually go as far out of your way to ensure that your users are inputting valid data. Next up we have the number field. This is actually just a roller, and you can set the minimum and maximum values for this, as well as the preset value. We then have the range. This is similar to the number, but it actually provides a usable graphical interface, rather than relying on the user actually typing in a valid number. We can see that different browsers have different implementations of this. For example, Internet Explorer has a very different approach. Next up we have a search field. This is intended to be used in combination with actual search engines, so for example Google or Bing, and it can be combined with things like autocomplete, which will allow users to take advantage of their search history when they're searching for new things. Next up we have the telephone number. Like the email, this actually will allow you to type anything into it, and when a form is submitted, it will actually check whether the telephone number is valid. Again, this uses a regular expression to actually validate the input, and it won't let you submit the form if the telephone number is incorrect or in the incorrect format. Now I've included the text field here, and this is simply because we now have access to the placeholder attribute. The placeholder attribute is simply some text which stays in the field, and when you start to type, it disappears. I have personally experienced people importing the entire jQuery library just to access functionality similar to this, and so this is something which will make a huge impact on the web as we know it going forward, because obviously we won't need to rely so much on jQuery. Things will be supported natively. Next up we have the time, which again is just an input mask. It allows the users to input any time that they like, and prevents obviously poor quality data being submitted to the server. The URL, like the telephone and the email, is actually a regular expression check. So when a form is submitted with a URL in it, it will actually check that the URL is valid. It does however require that the URL begins with HTTP or HTTPS. So you couldn't just type www.google.com into this field and submit a form. You would get an error message back. Next up we have the input type of week. Again, similar to things like month, this is just an input mask to make sure that your users are submitting valuable data to your system instead of invalid data. Finally, we have an output field. You may be wondering why this is useful, but if your users use things like screen readers, for example, or other accessibility tools, actually telling them where the output is actually very useful, because a lot of screen reader users, for example, are frequently blind or visually impaired. And so by using an output field, we can open our systems up to so many more users who may not otherwise be able to use our systems. Now, as I mentioned at the start of this video, it's unfortunately the case that not all of the different main browsers currently support all of the functionality equally. And so until HTML5 is fully supported across all browser vendors, web developers are going to have to continue to do user testing and different browser testing to make sure that their systems are accessible, using all different types of web browsers. In the next section we're going to look at the different ways that HTML5 allows us to use pictures, including things like using PNG files as favoricones. as well as some new formats such as PIMG and SVG, and even allowing us to create SVG images within a web page directly, as well as allowing us to use SVG to actually create pictures within the web browser from text alone. So stay tuned to make sure that you don't miss it. So if we refresh this, we can see that if we resize this frame, picture 1 on the right will change to picture 2.